Caddis Maximus here, this time reviewing the Ideal StripMaster professional grade automatic die cutting wire strippers. Now, these really are some of the best automatic wire strippers on the planet. However, they are not the absolute best, and because they aren't applicable to all situations, and there's some design features that are both good and maybe not your personal preference. But overall, if you're looking for easy to use wire strippers that guarantee a great strip, especially on stranded wires without severing any of the little strands, these are going to be your best bet. Such an unbelievable amount of times I've seen wires that have been, especially stranded wires. Solid wires are really easy to strip and durable, but stranded wires, I mean, all the time where I've seen terminations that failed because half the wires in the stranded wire were cut due to poor strippers or stripping technique. Particularly when using this style wire stripper, because these require a special technique, or using the more common and cheaper type of automatic pinch style wire stripper like these. Like those hand style die cutting, that's what these are. These have ground dies that come against the wire, except for they also have a foot that pinches the other side of the wire, and then through a mechanically controlled means, it pulls the wire apart right across the center line of the holes and not downward or upward, which is a really big cause of severed strands in stranded wire. And then they lock, release the jaws, you can pull the wire out, and then they'll automatically retract. We will be comparing these against the old generation from the 1960s or 70s, as well as the GC Electronics automatic wire strippers, which were actually the original of this split head design. Ideal came out with these to first upgrade these things, which were kind of funky, and to work around the patents of this unit. Although the patents have since expired, Ideal has been stuck with this design. This other red-handled set is actually a Blue Point set. We can see that right here. So they've been licensing these to all sorts of different companies, but the same unit and the same patent numbers that are actually imprinted on the handles. Let's go and demonstrate why these are some of the world's best wire strippers. One, you can be really careful because if you don't want to strip any wire, any strands, you can actually use the slightly larger size. A lot of times, you'll choose a 14 gauge die for a 14 gauge wire, and that's really pretty tight, gets the teeth really close to the actual wires themselves. With the way this mechanically pulls, you can actually use the next size up. Such is the case here. These are 16 gauge wires. We'll put them in the 14 gauge die, which is the second one in, and you just take it and strip it. And what's really nice is if you have a lot of wires to strip, it's actually pretty fast to get these in here and to just strip them without much issue. And the nice thing is if you're an electrical panel or anything, rewiring a CNC machine, it's just so nice to get the wire in there, strip it. It does leave a little bit of a mark on the installation. But if we look closely here at these wires, we can see that we have not broken or damaged any of the strands. And since we use a die that was slightly larger, the dies didn't even actually touch the wires. They may have scraped a little bit on the top, but that's effectively a machine or manufactured grade wire strip. They're really nice because you can strip just a really short portion of the wire, or you can strip huge amounts, and it's just as easy either way. Now, there are some caveats to these wire strippers. One of the issues that I've had, and this is why I say they're almost the best wire strippers in the world, is if we do something like this, where I've stripped the wire and then I kind of forget to pull it out and I let this come back. Sometimes the jaw will hit the end of the wire and cause it to fray pretty badly. It usually doesn't happen when you're stripping on a short piece of wire, but if you're doing, say, for some reason a really deep strip such as this, it's easy for it to kind of want to catch sometimes some of the strands, as you can see there. And that's because of the nature of the device. Once it opens and locks, there's a little transfer bar. And then when the handle comes up, it hits that transfer bar and causes it to automatically release. Aside from that point, these kind of wire strippers are also nice because of the way the jaws are well protected. Like in a toolbox, you don't have to worry about it coming open and having tools end up damaging the edges of the jaws, particularly the little fine ground teeth that help keep the blade centered. Now, if we compare these to, say, some of their other units here. Now, these are some ideal easy wire strippers. These were what existed before the StripMasters, but they're the same type of deal. They just have a much more convoluted design where they have three sides. They're still die cut, but they have three sizes on one side and three sizes on the other. Although they still work just great, they were a bit cumbersome. And if we demonstrate how these operate, they work still pretty darn well. And then they have that top jaw which locks it. And this is one of the things I kind of liked about this older unit, is the fact that that does permanently lock, and then when you're ready to release it, you can squeeze it again. And how that works, interestingly enough, is it won't lock unless there's actually a wire in the jaws to cause pressure. And so that creates a disadvantage. Even though this has some pretty small dies, the smallest wires in this unit get squished enough to where the automatic locking mechanism doesn't engage, and then it's always smashing the ends of the wires. Plus, it's a little bit uncomfortable to use and does have a poor leverage angle. You're going to have to squeeze pretty hard, surprisingly enough, just to get it to strip wires. And the other issue is that it's double-sided, so you kind of have to flip it over, which made it a little funky, and I understand why they went ahead and upgraded the design. Let's get another piece of wire here to go ahead and demonstrate the GC. So the GC Electronics, I've done reviews of their tools before. They're actually the General Cement manufacturing company, but not cement as in concrete. Cement such as electronic cements, cements to build speakers with, and that's actually how they started. And then they started making electronic tools and accessories, and that's where GC came from. But they were the first ones with this SpeedX Trigomatic. This thing came out a long time ago. Holy mackerel, this may be from the, it's like a half-century old tool. And compared to the StripMasters, there has quite a few different design differences, which I really appreciate. One, it's much lighter weight. There's just a lot less bulk in the unit. It used stamped instead of cast handles, and I'm actually fine with that because it's a wire stripper, and it further reduces the weight, making it more comfortable to use over the long term, or if you're stripping a lot of wires. That's what you really notice. This one has a really heavy head because they have these large jaws, and then they have all these metal pieces and metal transfer bars and stuff, all to get around the design of this GC, which is much simpler. The jaws are fixed on the upper portion, and when you close the handles, the lower jaws just lift up. And it's a really simple and easy design. Unfortunately, the ideals don't quite match up. Another reason is that head size. As you can see, the ideal heads are much larger than the GCs. The jaws also protrude out. So if you're working with these smaller sizes, you can get these around wires in a much tighter space than you can with this really bulky head on this ideal. And because you don't have all these bulky retaining plates and screws and nuts to hold it all together, you further reduce the weight. Another thing I like about this is it has an optional lock, or a configurable lock, which I haven't seen on any other type of die cutting wire strippers. And how this works is it actually has this little tab with 2 steps in it. So when you open it, you can just do a quick strip and open it halfway, or you can do a full strip and it'll lock in either position, and then you just press the button to go ahead and get it to release. Another nice option is you can actually disable the lock entirely. If you're in a certain situation where you just want to strip, say, a bunch of solid wires and you don't have to worry about bent strands, then you can have it not lock and just have a series of wires and put them in and just strip. Let me go ahead and show you that right now. We've got some larger 10 gauge wire here. And we can just, and so sometimes it will bang up the wires when you have it not in the automatic locking mode. But if you're used to it, then you'll just have tension on the wire, and as soon as you release the tool, you can pull the wire out without it banging up any of the individual strands. Additionally, let's go ahead and demonstrate why these are so much better, especially on thin wire. And really, especially considering these cheap automatic wire strippers, the pinch style. The problem with the pinch style, even ones with adjustable tension, is they just half the time they're tearing wires. They really only work for larger wires. Sometimes if you have tough insulation, it scrapes the edge, the outside of the insulation, but doesn't completely strip it. And on really, my biggest issue is the small wires, because sometimes they'll pinch way too much and actually break the wire. Doesn't appear I could actually get it to cooperate and do that this time on this particular wire, but that's always been the biggest issue versus die cut, because if you have die cut, then you always know that you're going to strip the wire, and it's always going to be absolutely perfect without having to worry about any strands breaking or maybe having the insulation not be pulled completely off or properly. However, these type of wire strippers do have their place because they're easy in situations where you need to just separate a little bit of insulation to get contact on a wire that's already in position and operational. Now, to finish up this review, one of the last things that these also have an issue with, where you would have to use some of the more traditional styles such as these, would be in situations such as you're rewiring an extension cord or putting a new cord in on any type of appliance. And those cord ends, you have to strip the wires. They'll have a big insulation around the outside, and you want that insulation to be inset into the cord or into the cord end so it can be pinched on the strain relief. Well, what that happens is when you strip the wires, the insulation is very close, usually an inch away from the end of the wire, and then you have to strip it. And when it's that close, it can be real tough to try to get these in here and to get enough wire to where you can get enough stripping, just because of that. The cross section there is, you know, more than a half an inch, 3/4 of an inch or something. And so that can make it nearly impossible when you have very little wire to actually grab a hold of. And that's where their primary disadvantage is in real tight spaces. You still have to use more traditional styles. That just about finishes up our quick review and comparison of the Ideal StripMasters. And just like I wanted to show these blue points just to show that they do hold up well. After years of use and beating around the toolbox, they generally remain okay. So they're definitely worth the investment. They can be had for around $30. But really, if you do any kind of work with wires, from fixing trailers to so many things, really recommend a good pair of automatic wire strippers, especially ones like these Ideals, because they just make it so easy, so convenient. You're always sure that you're getting a good strip. You don't actually have to pay quite as much attention to them because it's a mechanical device that's doing a lot of the work and accuracy for you. The speed and the fact that if you want to strip just a tiny little bit off the wire to screw into a terminal, or you want to strip an inch of wire, it's very easy to adjust that as well. Or if you stripped a little bit and you need to strip a little bit more, these are also great for that. That just about finishes up for this particular review. I really appreciate everybody watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.